Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strick and Roll. I'm your host, Shwin. In this episode, I don't know what episode this is. I'm just going to call it 54. I'm not sure what number. We'll figure it out. But before we get started, I have to introduce our guest. He is not a first-time guest of the pod, but a first time in a long time. His name is James Booth. That is at JBB Hoops on Twitter. James, how are you doing all the way down under?
Yeah, good man. I'm working at I'm gonna be getting up for work in 8 hours, so that just shows how much you mean to me, Shwin, how much Strick and Roll means to me. So no, I'm amped, man. And obviously it's been a big few days in the hoop world. I've got the I'm holding. I don't know if the viewers on the podcast can see this, but I'm holding up my shitty intro mic as one of those professional whatchamacallit mics, the ones with an actual stand and the thing around the top that looks but this is for those who know, this is just a blue snowball ice, so I'm gonna put this down and stop looking like an idiot in 2 seconds. But no, we're good, man. Let's get into it. How have you been? How's life?
Things are good. The Knicks
how did the
some big moves.
How did the free agency stream go in the end? Did you stream day 2 as well, or?
No, we just did the day 1, and then we did a reaction to Hartenstein leaving on day 2, and then But all right, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a lot of other teams' free agency. Before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First, Strickland has Instagram. Check that out. That is at Strickland on Instagram. We're posting all content on there. The Strickland also has a YouTube channel where you maybe watch this podcast. If you are not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that takes you to the merchandise store. There's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday at the Prez. You also get access to Takes One Out of His Bozos, our newest podcast that is hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland's Discord, where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strick and Roll, this pod right here, where I rant about things even more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marino, one of the best in the business. And now you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it is our podcast about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Mechkos. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits. Listen on pod coordinates, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-host a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. This would be possible without you. And none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season, from baseball, golf, soccer, right to all the top fights in UFC, MMA, and boxing. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit, up to $250. Bet online. The game starts here. All right. Well, we are here because you are known to the people as a connoisseur of, I don't want to say the dregs of the league, but the most arbitrary set of teams in the league is probably the best way to put it.
It's kind of true.
And funny enough, your arbitrary set of teams have all made some significant moves in free agency.
Yeah, it's whatchamacallit, my internal headcanon version of Infinity War or whatever. The last
So
to top it off, just get Isaiah Stewart on the Kings and all kinds of badgings.
So just so the people are clear, James' arbitrary set of teams that he's weirdly attached to for no apparent reason in many cases. The Kings, the Hornets, and the Bulls.
Get Charlotte off there, bro.
No, they got Josh Green. They're back.
Oh, true. Oh yeah. Josh Green, woo! Freaking 20 point per game to a shooting guard agenda.
Him, LaMelo, Mark Williams, you're gonna be cooking out there. But we're gonna talk about the Kings first, because the Kings did make the biggest move of all these teams so far, I would say. They acquired DeMar DeRozan. They trade out an unprotected pick swap in 2031. They ship out Harrison Barnes along with that to San Antonio. They give up 2 second-round picks and they give up the artist formerly known as Chris Duarte to the Bulls in this trade.
Oh,
They
bro,
give DeMar DeRozan.
KP should be hyped about that, man. I think Duarte's going to get some shots up in Chicago because,
He definitely
you
is.
know,
There's no doubt
like,
about
bro, a
that.
team with Josh Giddey and Patrick Williams as projected second and third options is like, there's going to be shots. There's going to be shots up.
Hey, if they have their way, that might be the number 1 and 2 options. You never know.
Yeah.
But so the Kings, there's been a little bit of discrepancy on this. There's no but the number that they gave DeRozan is something like somewhere between 3 years $70 million and 3 years $76 million. I don't know. I don't love this move because I just don't really like the fit with him and Monk and
Yeah.
Fox
So
and
why? All right,
Sabonis.
here we go. Let's get going.
I've actually come around on this a little bit because
Okay.
I think they still have all their after this year they can still trade out for unprotected first round picks. The pick swap is I think that's a little like I would not have felt comfortable giving a pick swap, but whatever, that's out the door. But they still have 4 unprotected picks to trade moving forward. Presumably, I think Keegan Murray is untouchable, quote unquote, right now. I don't think that necessarily means he's always going to be untouchable. I just think it's the right move for them to make him untouchable now. So he might be a piece that they put on the table next year. But the point being is they still have moves to make. And I guess if you're like them and they are not going to tank, like that was already known. If you're not going to tank and you're not going to do a rebuild, then you have to find ways to solidify a level of floor, especially in the West. And maybe DeMar DeRozan helps them do that. Also, his contract, it's the 3rd year is a small partial guarantee. So effectively next year, if need be, they could use him as an expiring contract to use in a trade as salary filler. So they still have some options here, which is why I'm less down on this move than I was initially. But I don't love the fit from a basketball perspective.
Okay, talk me through that. Like, which parts of the fit do you specifically not like, and then I can kind of go.
Well, I don't like anything about him with Sabonis. I don't like any part of that. I think that DeRozan likes to operate in an area of the floor, which is where Sabonis does all his bullshit, fucking fake dribble handoff. So that's I don't like that.
Slander.
I think it's like weird that I get it from the perspective of like they blew a lot of games last year in the fourth quarter. And even though Fox I think he was the second leading scorer in the fourth quarter last season, DeMar DeRozan was number 1. So it gives you more options there. But I don't love the idea of taking the ball out of Fox's hands a lot to give DeRozan usage, which is like, that's just going to be part of the balancing act they have to find. Ditto for Monk. I don't know about that fit. I don't know how they I'm assuming that they're going to have to play all 3 of those guys together at certain points, plus Sabonis. That feels clunky to me. The defense is going to be, it'll be something. And that all of it is like, it just feels like you're asking a lot of Mike Brown now. The size now overall in the wing is like, I don't know, like who's there? Is it just Keegan? Is that the big wing? That's the only one. It's just
don't forget about James Brew-Grant, OG, Jalen McDaniels. Like,
oh yeah,
you cannot forget about him.
How could I forget that?
I didn't like that career year in Toronto where you have like
it makes it even weirder too, or not weirder, but like forgetting like none of the assets they've given up in this trade were that extreme. But then you combine it with like they also did that trade at the draft where they gave up Davion Mitchell, the 45th pick. Like they just, and I'm like, again, Davion Mitchell is nothing special, but like they've just given up a lot of minor assets this offseason.
Yeah.
And the sum of it is Jalen McDaniels and then obviously DeMar DeRozan. And I don't know how I feel about all that, because if you told me what do the Kings need to get this offseason, I don't think DeMar DeRozan and Jalen McDaniels would have been on my bingo card. So I'm like, sure. I'm kind of like, I don't love it, but I think it's raw. It's probably too extreme to be like, this is an awful move and I hate it. I don't really know what it's going to be like on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree with the kind of offseason, like mapping out for Sack. Like I would have said priority 1 is try best to get like a legit starter in the front court to replace Barnes.
And they did try for Laurie. This is like they
Yeah.
made a legit offer for Laurie, and that just.
I'll get into that in a second because part of my the positive aspect to me about the DeMar trade is not kind of falling into that trap with Markkanen or Ingram, because I think those would have basically you could have just put a line through this team for the next 10 years if they made those trades.
Wow, so you're out on Markkanen. You're out on Laurie.
Bro, I was on Lowry when he got traded to Cleveland. Everyone thought he was going to be out the league in 2 years, so I'll never be out on Lowry. But I just think that fit, like, I think there's obviously fit questions between DeMar and the Kings, but I think there are probably low-key a lot of those with Lowry and the Kings, especially just considering DeMar's 34 or 5.
35.
Like, 35. So he's a clear like bridge option. Like his contract suggests that as well. 2 years, third years of basically a team or
it's like a non-guaranteed or whatever.
Not guaranteed, yeah. So like it's clearly designed with that kind of thinking that you're just suggesting, like it's a give him 1 year and then it can basically be an expiring if it doesn't work out. So and whereas Lowry would be like I think he's still on his cheap Cleveland contract, but he's going to get
you're going to have to extend him. So that's the other thing with Lowry is that he won't sign an extension because his extension, with the way the extension rules work, he would be taking way less than he would get if he hits free agency next summer. But if you're Sacramento, you're like, I don't know that I totally trust a player to be like, don't worry, man, I'll come back in unrestricted free agency. It's tough. So
we just saw the true sixth man of the year just do that. So I think you're sleeping on the genius of Monte McNair and the Morey general manager tree. Rosas is on the Knicks, right?
Rosas is on the Knicks, and then
so he's actually cooking, and the other two are kind of frauds, but
and I think Stone's actually has stumbled into doing a pretty decent job in Houston so far, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, it would have been crazy if they like traded everything from Mikal and like did that'd be
I think they ended up making the right moves here so far.
So DeMar, but so going to the offseason, I really want a defense on the wings, and that's kind of my philosophy. Like that might not be what's actually best for Sac, but I just think I think for the most part, it's just again, it's just how I view basketball. Like I think the most controllable part is honestly defense, and Sacramento, in so many big games over the years. Yes, the offense has actually been a bit more of an issue than you probably expect. Like even in the Warriors series, I think they would have had a good offensive rating, but if you watch the games, it was just a breakneck pace, and that carries with it its own kind of limitations. Because there is value in being able to slow down and just get a good look. And I think Jalen Brunson is probably one of the best examples going around of just because he can push, and I think one of the first things that stood out watching him on the Knicks was I think one of the first games I watched, it was against Charlotte, a battle against Dennis Smith Jr., legendary stuff. But he was pushing, because I think then he hadn't fully assumed, primary give me the ball every time type. He was I think when he immediately came in, they were like, okay, yeah, this is a guy we can trust. But he hadn't fully ascended to where he is now back then. And I think a big part of his game that stood out then was his ability to, push a little bit when needed. But then obviously, then you've got the Brunson who can just slow it down, ISO pretty much anyone. But in that series, they didn't really have that ability. And then, so offense has definitely been an issue, but defense, I think, is just the main kind of controllable thing that has let them down as well. Because not only do you have Sabonis, who's kind of, he's limited in his ways, but I think his limitations weirdly show up less in the playoffs because I think his biggest issue is the inability to play a deep drop that effectively. But I think in the playoffs, your almost default defensive coverage, I think, against pick and roll shifts to more aggressive just because you're playing to more talented ball handlers, I think. So that's an issue. Monk's definitely an issue, and that's why I agree with the defensive stuff because Monk, DeMar, I think Monk, DeMar, and Sabonis, who kind of he kind of compromises defensive shell with the way you have to play defense with him at the 5. It's going to be interesting to see how they balance that. Yeah, so that's why I wanted, someone like a Isaiah Stewart or a Dorian Finney-Smith, like just a trustable defender. Either you can trust him, covering a lot of ground, making huge closeouts, or you can just stick him on a guy. You can put him on any guy on a switch, and he'll pretty much bottle them up outside of the true, top 5, top 10 type players in the league. That's who I wanted mainly, and then also offensively, I just obviously was an issue. Mark was clearly ascending probably February onwards this past season, and I just thought that plus Keegan's going to get another year to develop. It's probably, I think it's probably talked about a lot in Sacramento circles, but yeah, it was a bit of a kind of, I would say, stagnation year for Keegan on offense. He had a huge game in the play-in, which kind of showed the vision with him, how his floor on offense is so high if he can just develop low-hanging fruit. But he's in the middle of that kind of developmental period right now, so he just the amount of little things that held him back from night to night impact on offense were huge. But yeah, I just thought another offseason for him, Monk continuing that ascension, that would kind of lead to kind of inherent progress in offense. And that's why defensive personnel, I thought they need to shore up. But that said, I think I've waffled for that stuff for long enough now. But that said, I think if you go by last season's sack, definitely areas that needed addressing were bench, just period. I think they were starting to figure it out at the end where they had I think it was Davion. Davion was starting to play better. Monk was coming off the bench and playing his best basketball of his career. You had Lyles, who's always been solid. So it wasn't terrible, but it definitely was an area of weakness. And then getting DeMar means that now you have DeMar, Fox, Monk, Sabonis, kind of 4 guys. You can kind of pick and choose 2 of them to always be on the floor. And that's going to raise the floor of those units a lot, especially the kind of probably the weaker units where, maybe last year Monk would have had to be the main guy. He can maybe have another option out there with him. And then, I think clutch time offense, I think we kind of have varying levels of where we view Fox. I thought
he had a terrible. I thought, I don't want to say terrible because that's wrong, but it was. I thought he definitely took a step back last year. I didn't like. I watched them enough that I felt like when I watched him, it felt very I don't know, something was off. I didn't love. It always felt like he played the previous year. He won that fucking clutch time award or whatever, right? But he was really good in crunch time in 2022-23. And last year, I know he was second in the league in fourth quarter points, but I don't know, man. I watched him enough where it felt like he just played with blinders on in the fourth quarter all the time, took a lot of stupid shots, forced it. I honestly, I didn't like the way him or Monk played in the fourth quarter last year. It felt very selfish from both of them. I'm not saying I don't know if DeMar, just having another guy he can truly trust changes that, but forgetting that, I just thought, I thought Fox was, I'll put it this way. I think the year before, you could reasonably look at him and look at Brunson and be like, they were both kind of viewed as, okay, these are ascending point guards who are now establishing themselves among the best point guards in the league. And then last year, it felt like Brunson obviously took his game to another level. And Fox, I quite honestly, I thought he took a step back last year. I thought he had a poor season, and I'm not sure what it was all about. To your point, you've been pretty consistent on this, that you think his ability to dribble penetrate is overrated, and that he's become very too reliant on settling for his mid-range game. That was pretty apparent if you look at the numbers from last year. I don't know what that was about, but he's still super fast, so he should be able to get to the rim. It just felt like he was settling a lot. And I remember I asked a few people during the course of the year, I was like, is he hurt? Is something, because he was just settling so much for the midi. And I had no idea, but he wasn't on an injury report. He looked okay. So I don't know what it was, but I thought last year he really took a step back in his decision-making and obviously his overall efficiency as well.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder, because the year before, Sacramento did have the number 1 offense in NBA history, I think. And I think a big part of that is, Keegan just being a corner spot up guy purely, which I thought in ways actually kind of, underrated his, whatever the word is, underrated his rookie impact, or how impressive what he was doing was, because he pretty much had the least touches of any rotation player in the flow, and it was still contributing. But to go from Huerta, who is limited, but in his spots, he knows how to make all the different reads. Really good if he can get a step on his guy going downhill out of the dribble handoff. He's got the floater, good passer in those spots. Going from that, and also, with Keegan being a corner, spot up merchant, Barnes probably also had a bit more involvement. And Barnes is another guy who I think you can trust to really make good decisions going downhill. I think that's always been an underrated part of his. That's probably been my favorite part of his game for the last few years. Just the ability to get downhill out of two-man game and kind of spray it out. So going from those guys being, consistently involved, especially Huerta, I think Huerta actually had he had a lot of assists to Sabonis, and if you get Sabonis going for the Kings, that opens up everything. The year before, then this past year, he went to just the nightly. I think he went from like 15 a game to like 11 off the top of my head, and just you could tell the night-to-night impact he was getting. He was closing a lot of games on the bench, which wouldn't have happened the year before. Right. Going from that to Keegan, I think that reduces the amount of kind of just shooting threat Fox has around him, because now you have, instead of having Keegan, who might have an off night, but you have Huerta, who's probably going to be locked in, Barnes or Monk, you have all these options. Now Keegan's your third option out of the starters at least, and then the fifth guy is you're picking between a bunch of guys who just haven't really caught a rhythm night to night, between Huerta, Barnes, Davion, stuff like that. That might have affected things. I think he had a clear jump in his 3-point shooting, which is really important, and I think it's going to really show next to DeRozan. But I think that also with it came a bit of like just boneheaded. Oh, I can shoot the threes, and because everyone's been telling me I'm a 3-ball away from being untouchable, I'm just gonna think I'm untouchable and just shoot all these bullshit threes. And I think the real thing is he's just figuring out the three is a real shot for me. How do I integrate this into my game naturally? But it just resulted in like some of those Suns games were just insane stuff. The stuff he was pulling against the vaunted point of attack defense of Bradley Beal, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, Kevin Durant at the 5, so he's not even at the point of attack, and then he was just shooting interesting shots. So
if anybody's wondering what game he's referencing, this is the game where I think the Suns, they were down by like 25 or something in the fourth quarter. It was a disaster. I think it was the biggest fourth quarter comeback in the league this past season. Yeah, so it was pretty wild.